Welcome back to another episode of Stacking Dennys. I'm Jordan McAbee of RotoBaller. My co-host Nick Giffen of the Action Network. William Byron in victory lane for the second weekend in a row. Him and Kyle Larson, the two dominant cars, the second weekend in a row. Byron finally gets his win at Phoenix. Sammy Smith in the Xfinity Series gets a win. I didn't watch the race, but I know we're going to have some comments on that. Controversy. Hendrick cars got some parts confiscated after practice. Hamlin and Chastain got into it again. There was another late caution that determined the ending of the race because Kevin Harvick should have won. But at the same time, most people said that that was not a good race. They did not enjoy that Phoenix race. And, you know, I think a lot of them have a point. I think a lot of people are sick of Phoenix. It's not a great racetrack, if we're being honest. But this was the debut of the new package that NASCAR has for shorter tracks, and I feel like they made some improvements, but at the same time, it was super difficult. Once you got out to the lead, you're pretty much running away with it, although we did see a pass for the lead. We saw Kevin Harvick take the lead, which, you know, we saw that last year a couple times as well with this short track package. Yes, it's possible. I would say it's less likely than old times would probably be the best way to put it. But overall, Byron in victory lane, once again, practice basically showed exactly what we were going to get in this race. I feel like it was super easy to read this race, who was good. We knew Kevin Harvick had a really good long run car. We knew Tyler Reddick had a really good long run car. They were there at the end. We knew Byron and Larson were the best cars after practice, after qualifying. You know, Larson was fastest in practice, fastest 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 lap averages, fastest in qualifying round 1, fastest in qualifying round 2. But yeah, once again, Kyle Larson kind of chokes away a race at the end due to a late restart, and it's William Byron that already has 2 wins to start out the season, and we're only 4 races in. So, Nick, what did you think of that race? Did you enjoy it more than most people did, or, you know, what'd you think?
I don't know. I kind of was indifferent on the race. I wouldn't say it was a good race, but I wouldn't say it was a bad race. Total passing was up, but quality passing wasn't necessarily up. So you could definitely pass, you could move through the field, but it was hard once you got towards the front, which kind of sucks because I think honestly, I don't necessarily think it's a product of the car because, you know, passing was up versus some of the previous generation car years. Overall passing was, even quality passing just depends on the year, etc. But I think it's just a product of the competition. These teams are all so good now.
Yeah.
When there's a lot of parity, it also becomes a lot harder to pass, right? Like, I think that's just a product of the time we're in. There's a lot of parity in this series, and it becomes harder and harder to pass every single car on the track. Even a driver like Aric Almirola, he started 31st. He made his way up to 21st, the end of stage 1. That's a lot of passing, but then he only got his way up to 16th when his tire literally, his wheel, like, literally came apart. And that means he had no quality passes because he passed all the way from 31st to 16th, but then 15th, 14th, like that. He couldn't do that because everybody at that level is so good. So I don't necessarily think it's the package. I don't necessarily think it's the car. I think it's just a sign of the times we're in where there's a lot of parity. You know, Stewart-Haas Racing had some down years, but they're kind of back. We've seen Chase Briscoe win. We've seen Kevin Harvick grab 2 wins and arguably had the best car. Certainly late in the race, he had the best car. And, you know, I don't think Aric Almirola has ever been the best driver. I don't think Ryan Preece has been the best driver. But Aric Almirola is performing fine enough, especially how he was moving through the field in this race before his wheel came apart. So I just think it's a sign of the times we're in. There's parity. When there's parity, it's hard to pass. These drivers are all very talented, and these teams are all developing more talent on the engineering and, data side so that they know exactly how to fine-tune these cars the way they need to be, which just makes it hard to pass. And when there's that level of parity, it's hard to pass. It's a lot easier to pass when you're clearly faster than the other, and we're not seeing that as much these days. So I think that's my opinion. I voted bad race, but not because I thought it was bad, mainly just because I didn't really feel like it was good. I was indifferent, and To be fair, I did have to miss the end of it for the NCAA selection show. Not the end to end. I actually was able to see that. But the selection show fired up with about 50 or 60 laps to go in the Phoenix race. And right around the time Harrison Burton caution happened is when the selection show wrapped up, and I was able to put the race back on simply because my job at Action Network required me to watch the selection show because I needed to give some immediate reaction. So it's like the first time in forever I've missed like a few NASCAR laps. But, I was just kind of indifferent to it, so it was fine. One thing I do want to point out, remember last year when William Byron grabbed his second win? He became the Hendrick Motorsports test car, I believe.
Yes.
Are we going to see that again if he falls out of contention for the points race? I think it's obviously way too early, but let's say he has a couple bad races and, the other Hendrick guys haven't gotten their wins yet. Does he become the test car? Because he's locked into the playoffs now. That's one thing I thought was very interesting with him grabbing his second win, the first Hendrick driver to do that this year, just like last year.
Yeah, I would say that's a possibility, except for the fact that that Chase Elliott's out. I think that becomes the test car a bit more likely than Byron. But
that's fair. That's a really good point.
Yeah, you mentioned Kevin Harvick there probably should have got the win if that caution doesn't come out. He actually had the second most fastest laps in that race behind Larson. Larson had 54, Harvick had 49, Byron had 47. Those three were clearly the three best cars. Green flag speed, it was those 1, 2, 3 again. And just going back to our picks last week, I picked Harvick, you picked Blaney. Hey, we both had top 5 finishes with our picks last year. We're off to a pretty good start. Just throwing that out there. But that those last couple cautions definitely shook up the running order in that race. And then, like I said, we had that, and we'll get to this in a little bit, the whole Hamlin Chastain thing. But Josh Berry came away with a 10th place finish. Alex Bowman ended up 9th. That's a good run for him at that track. Chase Briscoe, solid once again, even though he qualified 24th, finished 7th. And then Reddick there finishing 3rd after all the chaos. But, three best cars in that race, William Byron, Kyle Larson, Kevin Harvick, all did finish top 5. Chris Buescher had another good race, as did Brad Keselowski. Brad Keselowski had a really good race. He was legitimately running top 5 for a lot of that race. I think he was on old tires there at the end. He ended up finishing 18th. But this is just something to remember going forward with these short flat track races. I want to say we didn't learn anything with this race. The guys that we thought, like, we went into and we ended last week's episode talking about Phoenix saying we don't really know what to expect with this new package. I don't think anything changed. There's nothing that changed my mind that anything's going to change about which guys are good at which tracks. To me, these first 3 races of the season out after Daytona have just proven that the same guys are fast as last year, and that we can really rely on last year's speed and everything like that, all that data, to really get a feel on who is going to be fast this year, and then just bring in practice data with it and go. That's where I'm at right now, a month into the season.
No, I agree with you. I fully agree with you. I think all the guys we expected to be good at these tracks were good for the most part. Joey Logano wasn't. Usually he's really good at these short flat tracks, but for some reason, the Penske's in general just have not had speed. We saw it at Las Vegas. They didn't have long run speed. We saw it here at Phoenix. They don't have long run speed. This is like the new early season JGR at road courses from last year. The new early season thing is Penske doesn't have long run speed. And that's very concerning if you're Team Penske, because you're going to need that long run speed at Richmond. You're going to need it at Martinsville. You may need it at Bristol Dirt, honestly, which, experiences some fall off there. You're probably going to need it at Kansas. You're going to need it at Darlington. You're going to need it at Charlotte. Like, this whole first half of the season sets up for that. You better figure that out fast, because you're going to fall behind pretty quickly if you're Team Penske.
Yeah, and people might point out, Ryan Blaney finished second. He did finish second. Yeah, he was 7th in green flag speed. He finished 6th in stage 1, 8th in stage 2. When he had the absolute best car at Phoenix last year, and
both races,
you regress to that. That's a pretty big step backwards. And this weekend with practice, we saw Joey Logano completely fall off a cliff after his 5-10 lap averages. And I thought it was just maybe he had some bad laps in there. No, that car was junk. He legitimately got lapped by the leader. Blaney wasn't that good all day. Like, Penske just, they're off. And after this West Coast or during this West Coast swing, they definitely didn't improve any. It'll be interesting to see how they do moving forward. But as far as, other surprises, I guess, Ryan Preece ended up in the optimal lineup this week, which, I'll be honest, I completely missed that. And I don't know why, because I knew Briscoe was good. I knew Harvick was really good. It's another Stewart Haas car. Like, what am I doing? I'm kicking myself for that. Which, by the way, I need to point out, my history of DFS at Phoenix. I finally had a good week DFS at Phoenix. I was leading the mini-max for, I'd say, 90% of that race. I ended up finishing like the second best lineup, but my history with Phoenix. I've never been good at Phoenix, so that felt really good to me to finally have a very good race at Phoenix and get that little confidence boost that I always need with my DFS. But, Michael McDowell finished 13th. That's a great run for that team. They qualified 7th. Like, great run for them. Bubba Wallace, 14th. I kind of just going down the running order here. Outside of that, top 7 was really not super surprising. I would say Kyle Busch finishing 8th was a little surprising. He did not have speed all weekend, but they found something for qualifying and then ended up, running top 10 at the end of the day. But other than that, what do you, like I mentioned earlier, Sammy Smith winning the Xfinity Series. I don't know much about him. He's super young, right? He was in a Gibbs car. Full disclosure for anybody that's listening, I don't really watch Xfinity or trucks. I do if I don't have anything going on, but usually I'm just so focused in on Cup that I don't pay a ton of attention. So what's this Sammy Smith? I know you hit him 20-1, I believe, with your bets.
Yeah, I mean, just like your full disclosure, my full disclosure, I do create projections for Xfinity and trucks, and they are based off the same model I use for the Cup Series. That's it. I'm not an Xfinity or truck follower. I'll watch him for sure. I won't watch every single Xfinity or truck race like I will Cup, but I'll watch him as much as I can. But I don't know everything about every car and every driver. I don't follow them in their Arco or K&N or late model or dirt or wherever. I don't know. I just, once they get there, I just do my model and so I actually rely a lot on PJ Walsh from Action Network, who knows a lot about, he's the lower series expert in my opinion. So he identified Sammy early in the week, and then my model after practice and qualifying was really high on Sammy Smith. So, we took him 20-1, and it was kind of the same thing as Vegas and for Cup. And my dog's whining here. It was kind of the same thing for Cup with Vegas and Phoenix for Cup, where that long run speed really translated, and we had to look at the fall off. And I think, Sammy Smith, those JGR guys just showed really little fall off on the long run in the Xfinity race as well, which is what led me to him there. But yeah, hit him 20-1, but I can't take full credit for it. Certainly my model showed value, but I also love the spots where not only does my model show value, but PJ's brain shows value as well.
Yeah. Other than that, other news, Hendrick cars had their, I want to make sure I'm pronouncing this right. It's louvers. I don't know. It's something with the hood. And people are making a big deal of this, especially Denny Hamlin on his podcast. He's making a big deal of this, saying, NASCAR's going to come down with a big penalty on this. Here's the thing, though. NASCAR found an issue with these during their pre-inspection, before practice. They then let Hendrick go out and practice with these, and then they confiscated the parts. If NASCAR had such an issue with these parts, they would have confiscated them from the beginning. So I don't see how this is a big issue, and clearly it did not have it did not make them faster. If it did, it was minimal. So I'm just not seeing the big controversy here. They very well might get a penalty. They'll probably get a penalty. But from what I've read, I think these parts, it's kind of common for parts like these to be a little off. If I've seen a couple tweets about it, I haven't done significant research, but from what I've seen, it's kind of common for these parts. And yeah, people are going to point out as fast as Larson was in practice. And yeah, people are going to point back and say, well, it's because they're cheating. I don't think Hendrick's cheating at all. They have it figured out at the start of the year, and that's all there is to it. They don't need to cheat with these tiny little parts to get this Larson was the best car in practice by far. And by the way, while I'm thinking about it, shout out to DraftKings for leaving odds up during practice because Larson was out there flying, and he was still sitting there at 9-1 on DraftKings. So, there's my bet.
Yeah, I hit that.
Obviously, Larson didn't win, but if you're gonna leave odds up during practice and someone's flying that much, yeah, because he ended up he was plus 350 at some books by the end of the weekend.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. And so we're gonna get into wine about it in just a second. I have 4 wine about it, so I'm gonna actually make you go first. I'm gonna make you go first because I want to see what yours is.
Because I have one. But I have a good one.
But I will say this could tie into potentially one of my wine about it's. But not only did I bet Larson because, like you said, shout outs to DraftKings for leaving that up. But FanDuel, after practice and qualifying, had Byron 10-1, and for some reason they moved him to 12-1, which is when I bet him, which made no sense because he was fast as shit. And then moving him back to 10-1 after I, messaged the Action Network Discord and then tracked it and all that. He moved back to 10-1, and then moved even shorter after that. But I also hit Harvick 10-1 when. So the louver thing. When that news came out, I saw how good. So, the 3 drivers I identified in practice were Larson, Harvick, and Reddick. And then, towards the end, William Byron as well, because I realized, and PJ helped me realize, that, William Byron made a run at the end of practice when the track was slower, which I thought was really important. But the idea was Byron and Larson were both part of that Hendrick stable that had the louvers taken. I didn't know if that was going to make a difference or not because this was between practice on Friday and qualifying on Saturday, where I love that. We have time between practice and qualifying. So books reopened odds, and they had Harvick at 10-1. I was like, well, if it actually really matters somehow for these Hendrick cars, then Harvick looked the next best to me along with Tyler Reddick. So I took Harvick because I liked his outright odds, and I took Reddick as top Toyota because I liked his practice times. So, I think it's obviously shout outs to DraftKings on that, but you also got to give yourself multiple outs in these. I guess this is a mini whine about it as my dog's whining here because he wants to steal my chicken nuggets because I haven't eaten because it's March Madness week and I have a lot of shit to do. So if I'm eating on air, I apologize. But, or if LB's whining on air, I apologize. But, here you go. Have that. I should give him a chicken nugget, but, leave yourself multiple outs. Don't just bet one outright. I see a lot of people complaining that they had Harvick outright and he didn't win. Well, I had Harvick, Larson, and Byron. And I let people know about it when I bet them. So, join the Action Network Discord. Follow us on the Action app, Jordan and myself. And follow us on Twitter. Obviously, you probably already do. But the idea is, I guess this is the little mini whine about it is and you got to, when you tweeted what are the questions we have, somebody asked, does it bother you that all these races end with the guy that should have won not winning? No, doesn't bother me. Doesn't bother me one bit. I don't give a shit. That's why, I benefit from that sometimes and I get sucked out on it, in poker terms. Sometimes I lose from it. But there's a lot of times where I'll lose one but then hit the other. And that's totally cool. It all balances out in the end. And here's the thing. Harvick's team could have taken 2 tires. Just like last year at Bristol. They probably should have stayed out or taken no tires or 2 tires or whatever it was. I don't remember. Where Chris Buescher ended up winning. Harvick's team basically has screwed him twice now. So I'm not if I was a Harvick bettor and that was the only bet I had, I'd be mad at myself because the end of the race is part of the race. Just because a caution came out 10 to go doesn't mean, there aren't circumstances where Harvick can't lose. So, no, that doesn't bother me. Yeah, it sucks. I hate when I lose that way, and I'll complain about it, but that doesn't make me hate NASCAR or hate betting because of that. Yeah. It's just how it works, and I think, you got to give yourself a couple other outs, and you also have to realize these teams are not perfect. We see all sorts of teams make all sorts of different mistakes. Look at Vegas last year. Kyle Busch or Martin Truex Jr. are going to win that race until caution comes out with 4 to go. Alex Bowman wins the race. And you had Alex Bowman 22-1. You profited from that situation. But then there's other situations we've lost from it. So it balances out. And, it sucks when you're on the guy that should have won and then didn't. But that's also on Harvick's team for not choosing the right strategy there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you mentioned having, multiple outs. Byron was 5-1 as top Chevy. So I had Larson outright. I thought the two best cars in this field were Larson and Byron. So then I bet Byron top Chevy, hit that. And then once I saw, as soon as Byron took the lead early, I bet him live because I thought Larson was going to completely dominate the first stage. And I ended up taking, I had to take Byron live. Took him also to win both stages because he was listed at 750 to 1 to win stage 1. You just can't pass up stuff like that. And I know people might call me out here because I didn't tweet it. I literally put that in at 3 minutes before the race. I just forgot to tweet. It happened. Sorry.
Of course. Yeah. We're all human.
Yeah. So I won that, and I didn't after the race was over, I didn't say I won this bet because I didn't want to get the shit. But I won the stage bet and then lost the stage 2 bet because I had that on Byron. But overall, very good day. But Hamlin Chastain, is that part of your whine about it, or can we talk about this first?
That's not part of my whine about it.
Okay, so Hamlin came out and basically said. And there were people talking when it happened that it wasn't intentional, and then the in-car camera came out. I think NASCAR actually themselves put it out there, the 2 in-car cameras, and you can watch on the final restart, Hamlin just kind of takes out Chastain, puts him in the wall. They both finish, Hamlin finishes 23rd. Chastain finishes 24th, last 2 cars on the lead lap. Hamlin came out on his podcast, I think yesterday, day before, and said, yeah, that was intentional, 100%. And it's, now NASCAR is investigating it. So Hamlin could be looking at a penalty for this, which I would completely disagree with. If NASCAR comes out and gives a penalty to Hamlin for this, I completely disagree with it. But there's also
I got things to say on that for sure. I would agree with you there 100%.
There's also these two obviously have bad blood. They do not like each other. They legitimately do not like each other. And
they did come to a truce, so to speak, though, after all that.
Yeah, which I don't know. That's weird. But I think that was a really weird spot for Hamlin to pay him back. Not to mention he didn't really pay him back.
I actually think that was the perfect spot. I honestly thought that was a perfect spot because you remember last year we were like, he's not going to pay him back in the playoffs. He's not going to pay him back in the playoffs. He's going to do it at some point in time where it means a lot less, but it still isn't meaningless. And I thought that was the perfect spot to pay him back. You see the dude on your outside, just let the wheel go and just put him in the wall with it. And instead of him finishing 10th and getting a really nice points finish, make him finish 26th. If that means he gets 1 or 2 less playoff points later on in the playoffs, that's perfect. You accomplish your goal. You send a message. You cost him a couple playoff points potentially, and it's over. Then you move on. And you didn't do it in the playoffs when he's going to wreck you back in the playoffs and cost you a championship. I think I thought that was the perfect spot to do it. Because, remember, he said he was going to pay him back, and that Pocono thing last year was not the payback. We both agreed that wasn't the payback. He didn't touch him. He just raced him hard. He certainly didn't give him any room, but he didn't touch him. He raced him hard. And I think this was the payback that we've been waiting for, and I actually think this was a good spot. Maybe you could have cost him a win or something, but you don't know if you're going to put yourself in that position where you're going to be able to cost him a win. So why not just cost him... As I spit here, why not just cost him an opportunity at any sort of decent finish when you have that opportunity? I thought it was the perfect spot.
Yeah. So Hamlin basically said, for those that don't know, he said, I think he restarted 5th or something. They restarted up there, but Hamlin basically said, we're on old tires. He's talking about himself. I'm on old tires. I'm going to finish mid-teens no matter what. You're going with me. And, it basically took him and Chastain out. Like I said, they were the last 2 that finished on the lead lap. They both finished in the top 10 in both stages. They had good race cars. Hamlin probably had a top 5 car. Chastain had a top 10 car. So it was definitely, I get what you're saying though. It makes sense. What else? You said you had some thoughts. If NASCAR comes down with this penalty, which I think
it's super contradictory. I think it's super contradictory. Yes. How do you say boys have at it and then penalize someone for contact that wasn't dangerous, intentionally horrifically, dangerous at a high speed, hook them in the right rear into the outside wall type thing. This was boys have at it. This wasn't putting your personal safety at risk, which I think it's still a gray area, but I think there is a very clear line between what Hamlin did and what Bubba Wallace did to Larson. I don't think those two
That's what I was gonna say,
comparable
yeah.
at all. But if NASCAR has their decree from a decade ago, if boys have at it, they'll police themselves, then why won't you let the boys have at it if there's nothing really risking safety? And it's not like, and there's another rule, the 100% rule. It's not like Hamlin wasn't going 100%. He already knew he was going to get passed and freight trained. So he wasn't costing himself any more until, Ross brake checked him there in the back straight, but that wasn't Hamlin. That was Ross brake checking him. Hamlin already knew he was losing all those spots, so why not take somebody with you? In that way, he almost went 100% because he took somebody with him and made sure he stayed at least ahead of them or, near them. So I just think it would be a terrible ruling on NASCAR's part to penalize that. I think it makes sense that, they look into it, but there's no way you can do anything.
No, and the type of people that would be up in arms the most would be the ones that were upset about the Bubba Wallace thing last year, and the last thing I want are those people to get pissed off because just the way they are. So, yeah, it would be very bad if NASCAR penalized Hamlin, and I don't think he would have said that out loud if he thought he was going to get penalized. So I just don't see it happening. You can hate the guy all you want. There's no way you penalize him in that situation. But another late penalty, I thought, my initial reaction on that, or not late penalty, late caution in that race when Harrison Burton spun out, kind of ran out of talent there. Speaking of, not to get off on another tangent here, but young guys struggle once again. Ty Gibbs, 28th. Noah Gragson, 29th. Obviously, Harrison Burton struggled all race and brought out that late caution. We said it last week. These young guys just aren't adapting to this car very well, and we're seeing it time and time again. It's just not happening. Josh Berry, though, like I said, did finish 10th. So, but that was kind of like a survive.
Finished 10th, but that was kind of like late race restart, two late race restarts, right? We had the Burton caution, and then there's a spin right after that on the ensuing restarts. There were two late restarts, and that's a whole lot different from he ran well all day and deserved that top 10. That was kind of like not lucked into it, but was certainly benefited from the circumstances top 10.
I like to call it Phoenixed into it because it seems like we always get late cautions here, and they always screw me in DFS, and that's just like I remember. I called it.
You messaged me on Twitter 50 to go or something. How is this going to screw me over?
Yeah. Well, like Austin Dillon, he was running 26th all day, and then he got back on the lead lap, and I'm like, awesome. He's going to get into the optimal today because he started 30th, and he's just going to luck around. Like his driver rating in that race was 52.3, and he finished 16th. So, but yeah, another late race caution, like you said, we can't really. My first thought on this caution was it was another quick trigger by NASCAR, but they had to call the caution there. That was a 100% a caution. I couldn't even start to dispute that. So my point was null and void as soon as I started talking or tweeting about that being a quick caution. But yeah. Anything else from Phoenix before we get into whine about it?
I didn't see the caution because I was doing the NCAA basketball selection show thing. So I have zero opinion on whether that was a good or a bad caution. But as far as Phoenix goes,
it was solid.
Yeah, as far as Phoenix goes, I don't have any other stuff to add. Honestly, I was very indifferent about that race as a whole. I think there is obviously those notable things to talk about, the louvers and the Chastain Hamlin incident. But outside of that, and I guess the aero package, what is NASCAR supposed to do, right? Like they took away the downforce. They made the cars harder to drive. I think it's just the parity right now. The only other thing, which NASCAR, well, there's two other things. A, NASCAR could add a bunch of horsepower back. They're not going to do that. We already know that. B, they could reduce the, the amount of traction these tires have, the amount of contact surface area, by reducing the width of the tires, which is not going to happen. 100% is not going to happen with this current car. They need the wider tire. So then it comes back to, well, do they do the grooved tires thing, which creates less contact area, less surface area. And that's what Formula One did for a while there, which they ended up eventually moving away from. But that would just be the only other thing. But at this point, I don't know what else NASCAR can do at this point in time to fix, air quote, fix the short tracks, because I don't think there is anything. But yeah, I don't really have anything else for Phoenix.
Okay. So that's going to bring us to Wine About It this week, presented by RotoBaller Winery. And you know us, we try the wines that we have. Last week I tried the Passion Strawberry Lemonade. This week I got the Passion Blueberry Lemonade. So I'm going to go ahead and pour a glass here. Not drinking too much today. Nick and I were talking about this before the show. I'm kind of off the drinking wagon right now, and Nick's been so busy this week he doesn't want to drink. So You're not going to get our normal cracks, all
15 beer cracks or whatever.
Yeah, all episode, but we can take an episode off. But
for those of you who aren't watching YouTube, my opening crack wasn't even a beer; it was a mango White Claw. Like that's how chill I'm being. So
yeah,
you've got your drink, and just repeat the name of that again, and go for it.
Yeah, it's the Passion line, and it's blueberry lemonade. Like I said, last week I tried the strawberry lemonade of this line, and I really liked it. It's probably my new favorite wine, but I'm going to go ahead and try this one here. See, it's so good. It's so good.
That was very ASMR microphone. That was really good.
It is it is so good. Like there's a hint of carbonation in these lemonade wines. So I found out these are new to RotoBaller. They're a new line, and there's a little bit of carbonation, and it hits right. And there's a perfect blend. I could drink an entire bottle of wine of this just sitting here. I could probably go through this whole thing. If you like, it's not too it's not too lemony, and it's not too blueberry. It's a good combination. And like I said, we're going to review wines this year that we do not like. But so far, I'm 2 for 2 on my reviews. This is really, really good. Passion strawberry or blueberry lemonade. Sorry. And remember, you can get all of these wines shipped directly to you. I include the link in the YouTube description. I tweet it out. They'll ship them straight to your door. I think you save 10% if you order a case. Ship it straight to you. These wines are not expensive, and they're very good. Trust me. But my wine about it this week is, I noticed during the broadcast, there was a time, I think it was McDowell and someone else that were speeding, and Clint Boyer was just like, oh, the 34 and I forget who it was. He just said the car numbers were speeding. This reminds me of Jim Utter on Twitter, who we all hate. But
I had my mic muted. I did an audible groan that I had my mic muted for, but you saw my face, which is why you're laughing. I went something like, and like, yeah, I agree.
You know, it's not putting any effort into, depicting and describing what's actually going on. I understand that Clint Boyer and these guys in the booth are looking at a monitor and they're seeing the numbers and they're reading the numbers, and that's why they're saying this in their head. But they need to be smarter. They need to be trained better to actually present the information, because you know what? You're not going to get casual viewers watching these races if you're sitting here pointing out the numbers, especially the way that drivers change cars all the time. Drivers change numbers, cars change numbers. You're not going to continually add to this audience if you are putting in half-assed effort of these broadcasts. So this whole just saying the number and assuming that, obviously you and I know who these drivers are. When he says 34, I know they're talking about Michael McDowell.
In Cup, I couldn't tell you who they are in Xfinity or trucks.
Absolutely not. And like I said, I understand that.
And I honestly, I watch almost every Xfinity or truck race. Not everyone, as we talked about, but I watch a ton of them. I couldn't tell you who the numbers are half the time. I mean, outside of maybe the top 10 or 12 drivers in Xfinity, I don't think I could tell you most of the numbers at all. Even in trucks, the top several drivers, I don't know what Ty Majeski's number is, and he's a championship contender. I don't know what Ben Rhodes' number is. I just don't. I don't follow that series close enough and have those numbers stuck in my head to remember. So you need to inform, and I'm right there with you, you need to inform your audience what the 34 is. Because, again, diehards like you and I for Cup know what that is. But we're the exception to the rule. There's millions of people watching, but they're not all the diehards like you and I are.
And yeah, like I am, like anything that I do in life, I try to, like, I work in marketing, and my rule is you need to make things as simple as possible for people to understand. And if you're trying to sell something, you have to make it as easy as possible for them to buy it and as simple as them for understand why they need it. And just this, like I said, this half-assed presentation is, you add that to the fact that the broadcast isn't that great. You know, you couldn't even, in that specific circumstance, there was no running order on the screen, so you couldn't even look and try to reference a number. Not to mention, if one of them was running outside the top 20, they wouldn't be shown on the screen anyway, because Fox doesn't show anything outside of the top 20. You know, it's just, they need to get better with presentation of information and understand that, act like you are presenting this broadcast to people that have never ever watched a race before, and I guarantee you'll be able to attract more viewers. Look at what F1 did with their Netflix series. It's super simple to understand what's going on, whether you've ever seen an F1 race or not.
Yeah, and I want to add something here. Two things, and this is a little bit of a comparison. So you mentioned Clint Boyer. Dale Jr. would not be going, oh, the one car, and if he does,
oh no,
it's only because it's right there on TV. You know, oh, the one car spinning, but we all see the one car spinning, right? He's not going to say the 34 car got a penalty. Like, Dale Jr. is so informative, so excitable. That's another thing. And very clear with what he's trying to say. And then that's why he's such a good commentator. He might actually be the best commentator of all of them in both NBC and Fox. And I actually
completely agree.
Don't even say might be. I think he is. Because he wouldn't do that. And the only time he would say the 1 or the 34 is if he was already talking about them or they were on the TV at that point in time.
Yep.
Additionally, the other one, so I said 2 points here. You mentioned Jim Utter, and you know who's the opposite of Jim Utter is Hall of Famer, future Hall of Famer Bob Pockrass. I've never seen Bob Pockrass just be like, the 34 and the 7, this, that, and the other. He is so detailed and helps people understand. There's a reason people love Bob Pockrass. There's a reason people ask him every question under the sun, because he answers clearly, and so that anybody from the casual to the troll to the diehard can understand what Bob Pockrass is saying. And believe me, there are people who will intentionally troll Bob Pockrass, tweets him and stuff, and he'll still somehow play them off and make himself look like just an incredible... Because he is. I mean, it's genuinely who he is. He's an incredible person, genius, and has all the right information, whether that person's trolling him, is a newbie or an expert. And I think that's the sign of a great, media personality, whether it's on social media or on the TV broadcast or on radio.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the thing about Pockrass is he never half-asses anything. Like, you can ask him the simplest or the most complex question, and he's going to fully answer it. And that's why everyone knows that if you're going to get an answer, you actually want an answer, you're going to get a full answer from Bob Pockrass. But yeah, that is my whine about it this week. Just get better, present information better, and everyone will be happier.
I agree. I guess that means it's time for my whine about it. So this week, I have chosen the Reds line of wine, and it is the Red Blend. And as if you're viewing on YouTube, you can see I haven't opened it yet, so I'm just going to open it right here. Now, last week with the Bourbon Barrel Aged Merlot, which was absolutely incredible. I highly recommend you go buy that. I previewed that, tasted that ahead of time. And the Purple Rain, of course, is the flagship. So I loved both of those. My guess is I'm not going to love this one because red blends just in general just aren't my thing, but I don't know. That is a preconceived, bias that I have, an anchoring bias. So it's time to try the Luvabella Winery. Let's go ahead.
I will note that this wine that you're trying is what got me to really like this whole brand. Like,
See, now you're counteracting my anchoring bias, which is good. You're neutralizing it.
I really liked it. Obviously, once I tried Purple Rain became my favorite. But I really liked this when I first tried it. It's what got me to start drinking wine. So let's see what you think about it, though.
Yeah, so we're going to go ahead and try the Louisville Winery's red, what is it called? Reds line. It is their red blend. So time for the ASMR sip. All right, it's just like I thought. And when I say I dislike, I don't dislike it. I wouldn't go to that wine because it's not my style, but it's very neutral. So if you don't want something acidic or sharp or super, in terms of like a white wine, which this is not a white wine, if you didn't want something super buttery or whatever, this is a very neutral wine, which if you're getting into wine, I think this is the perfect starter wine. It is not a wine for me because Jordan's pointing to himself and saying me. It is a perfect starter wine, and I think that's what got you into it. I think this is absolutely right. I think it's a perfect starter wine because it's incredibly neutral. It has some flavor, like not overpowering flavor. So it's a good transition from other drinks you might drink to this. So I will drink it. I don't dislike it. I don't think I will dislike anything but maybe a really buttery Chardonnay, which is a white wine. I typically don't think I'll dislike anything, and there's very few things I dislike, even on foods. This isn't my go-to wine, but I totally will absolutely drink this whole bottle, no problem. There's no doubt about that. It's not a bad, unpleasant flavor. It's a very good flavor. I just, I don't think it's enough flavor, enough differentiation for something that I would prefer, just given the fact that I do like drinking a lot of different wines. But totally will absolutely drink it all. And if you are not a wine drinker, you should get into wine drinking with this Louisville Winery Reds Line Red Blend. So, I think that's what got Jordan into it. So, it's the perfect... What do they call it? The gateway drug? This is the perfect gateway wine. Yes. One more sip here. So I have to get into my wine about it, and I was debating between two of them. So I'll let you pick, Jordan, which of the two I do. So topic number 1 is Alex Bowman, and topic number 2 is the location of the championship race.
Oh, man. Let's do location of championship race.
All right. So this is what we're going to do. Phoenix is the location of the championship race. And we just saw the race at Phoenix. I think a lot of people were underwhelmed. And we saw this last year with Martinsville, where a lot of people were underwhelmed by the first Martinsville race. And the second one was actually really good. Yep. The problem here is we don't have the crazy cold temperatures. We don't have an excuse for why this could have been really bad. And again, I don't think it was really bad. I just don't think it's not a championship-worthy race. It's just not. Phoenix is not a championship-worthy race. And I understand NASCAR can't do anything about it, but Phoenix was not a championship-worthy race 2020, 2021, 2022. It's not a championship-worthy race. We need to move on. I don't understand what was wrong with Homestead. It produced great racing every year. It still does. And I don't necessarily think Homestead needs to be the championship race every year, but we got to have better races than Phoenix for the championship race. This has to be the last year. Please, NASCAR. The other thing is making it a one-race championship. I understand why they're doing it. It is the second Super Bowl that NASCAR has. You kick off the year with the Daytona 500 Super Bowl. You end with a one-race thing, but it does tend to lead to an advantage for certain driving styles and or teams by having it be a one-race thing. I think while I love the playoff format by and large, I think it would be better to have potentially a multi-round or a multi-faceted way to decide the championship. So that's less my whine about it, more than just like, come on, we got to move on from Phoenix as the championship race. And we're trying to make Phoenix better. If we're trying to make Phoenix better, that already is a problem there for it being your championship race. If you've already made changes to make it better, you're already pointing out your championship race has a problem. So why are we still doing this? Just I don't have anything else to add. It's a very short whine about it, but that's my whine about it.
So is Phoenix locked in to be the finale next year too? Or I thought they were thinking about changing it.
I honestly I don't know, but my whole point is whether it's locked in or not, it needs to change.
Yeah, and like, do you think we need to cut down to just one Phoenix race too, or is two still fine?
I think we should cut down to one. I think Martinsville's enough of a novelty where you can make it two, but between Richmond and Phoenix, we should not have 4 races.
Oh no.
We should not have 4 Phoenix and Richmond races. We need more diversity. So that's kind of a secondary point to the championship race, but I agree with you there. Between Richmond and Phoenix, we should not have 4 of these. And I understand you want shorter, flatter tracks on the schedule, but then just move at least one of them to a different shorter, flat track. I think maybe there's potential that North Wilkesboro will come back as on the main schedule, which would be great. So, and I'm not criticizing NASCAR because I know they're always trying to work on the schedule, and I honestly think they've made a lot of improvements from years past. And I just think as far as championship race specifically, we have to move on. It's not doing it for me. I don't get excited about Phoenix like I do about Homestead for the championship race. I never have, and I don't think I ever will. With that in mind, with the diversity and all that stuff, and this comes back to what Greg Mathern tweeted about. When he's glad the Atlanta race is no longer 500 miles; it's 400 miles. And maybe I'm in the minority. Maybe you agree. I always want more NASCAR racing. When the race ends, I'm just like, God, I cannot believe we have to wait 7 more days for the next Cup race. I don't want these races ever to end because I love Cup racing. And there's nothing that will get me to want shorter races. I just love NASCAR racing. I love IndyCar racing so much that I get a little bummed. Like, I get excited, obviously, when the race is over, especially if my guys won or, my bets won. But I don't like waiting a whole week for the next race. And I understand. I'm, don't have kids, so I don't have things to do or take care of, etc., necessarily as much as other parents do. But that's always been the case. Parents have always been parents throughout history. I remember growing up, NASCAR races were predominantly 500 miles. And, I guess that's what I'm attuned to. But obviously, this modern age with cell phones and electronics and all that stuff, I don't care. That just makes me want to watch the race more with all this stuff because I can then tell my friends that I don't get to watch with in real time. We can chat about the race or whatever, So it's, it doesn't matter whether it's electronics or in person or not. I just want more racing. I love racing. This is why I do this. So this is a secondary rant because you made me think about it when we were talking about schedule changes and stuff. And I was like, well, we've changed the schedule, all that. I don't know. I always want more racing. And I really also obviously don't want Phoenix to continue to be the championship race.
Yeah, I think we don't realize how spoiled we were when Homestead was the championship race. I feel like that's a very good track. It mixes in the 1.5 mile aspect of the schedule while also mixing in the fact that you need to be really good as a driver with tire wear and managing that throughout the race. Another track that I could see,
and it mixes in, not just the 1.5 mile, and not just the tire wear, but like. It's not the true 1.5 mile. It's not your typical cookie cutter 1.5 mile. So it presents some steep trackness type stuff as well. A little bit of Dover, Bristol style, but also on asphalt instead of concrete. I thought it was a really good average track, so to speak.
Yeah, you have to be a wheelman to run well there.
Oh God! And speaking of wheelman, I was cracking up at one point while you were talking because I tweeted a little thing like going into Atlanta. I was like, I have no idea why Kyle Larson's co-favorite for Atlanta at half these books. And at NASCAR Probs replied to me, and you should follow them. They're only got 65 followers, but they do some NASCAR analytics as well. Yeah, they're good. So NASCAR Probs, at NASCAR Probs, tweets me, yeah, but have you considered that he's a wheelman? About Kyle Larson? I just couldn't stop laughing. So shout outs to them. Thank you for listening to the podcast and very much enjoy the work you do. So keep it up.
Yeah. Speaking of one more thing, like I think Homestead was the perfect option for a championship race. Second would be, in my opinion, Darlington. Throw Darlington in there. And again, it's another high wear track.
Darlington would be an incredible championship race. The problem is it's the Southern 500 Labor Day weekend crown jewel. I don't think that'll ever change.
Yeah, that's true. But we can hope. But speaking, one more thing before we end this. Speaking of people listening to this podcast, I didn't even tell you this. Last week's episode, fourth most listened to in the history of this podcast. So nice. Since Daytona, we have 3 of the top 4 ever listened to episodes. So thank you everybody that listened.
And the only other one was right after somebody won $1 million.
Exactly. So, so thank you everybody for listening. Thank you, Luvabella, for sponsoring this podcast. As I said, you can get these wines shipped directly to your door. I'll drop the link in the YouTube description. I'll drop the link on Twitter. If you don't want to get them shipped to you, they are in the big stores. They're in Kroger, they're in Meijer, they're in Walmart. They're in states, North Carolina, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Virginia, West Virginia, Tennessee, Alabama, Georgia. Please try these wines. We are not lying to you when we say they're good. Check them out. But now we are going to get into talking about Atlanta, new Atlanta, because people that aren't super in tune to this sport will look at Atlanta and say that we have a ton of data to look at. We have tons of races. We have certain drivers that are good here. No, Atlanta completely changed before the start of last season. Atlanta used to be a high wear, mile and a half. Typically one guy would nail the setup and nail the run and win by 20 seconds type of racetrack. This is now what you and I like to call a pseudo speedway. Mm-hmm. Similar to Daytona and Talladega, all of a sudden we have pack racing here at Atlanta. And that's something to definitely to get used to as far as what to expect this weekend when it comes not only to betting, which you tweeted out, thank God for March Madness, because there's nothing good to bet on this week, and I completely agree with you. I don't have any interest in betting this week. I'm not seeing any value anywhere right now, and I doubt I will even after practice. Well, there is no practice this week, which I don't get. Why don't they practice? This doesn't make sense to me.
I honestly don't know. No clue, no idea why. And there was definitely no outright value. Books have since released qualifying odds, which I have zero interest in. I'm not a qualifying bettor, but they have released, at least Caesars has, and I know FanDuel has released some of the props as well. I know DraftKings has top 3s and 5s as well. So I have found some value. I will give those out on the Running Hot podcast, which I'm recording tomorrow with Stevie. But I should still air on Thursday because we're recording it tomorrow night instead of our usual Thursday morning, midday time. But I'll give those out then, just because even though I do find some value, I'm not like jumping to bet it or anything like that. So not too worried about it. Plus, I have the March Madness focus. But you're right. I think the outrights this week are just pure garbage. I mean, when you've got a guy, and I think somebody else pointed out on Twitter, and I'm indirectly quoting them, and I cannot remember who. My apologies, but if you tweeted this out, I'm indirectly quoting you. When Todd Gilliland hasn't won a race and he's 60 or 66 to 1, and he's never won a race. And don't get me wrong, I think he was really good at the bigger drafting tracks. He hasn't quite been that at the smaller drafting or the pseudo speedway. I think it's ridiculous. Corey LaJoie, I understand. He nearly won this race last year. But I don't think that makes him a value at 60 to 1 or 66 to 1 or anything like that. So I'm not finding outright value in this race. So, and plus you never know who it's going to be. You don't know that it's going to be LaJoie again. You don't know this, that, or that, especially on the favorites. I just don't find a lot of value. Will I end up betting something? Maybe, probably. I have a couple leans, I guess I would call them, even in the outright market, but there's nothing I'm jumping to bet at, I should say. Maybe I'll end up on something, but if I do, it'll probably be over the weekend if it's on anything outright.
Yeah, if I end up betting anything this week, it's going to be because I want action and I want something to root for. It's not going to be something like this guy's mispriced, because we barely have any track data on this new Atlanta, one, and two, it's not predictable. Like, the level of predictability of Atlanta went completely nosedived with this new track configuration.
You know what else we have no idea if it's completely mispriced or not, and I have no idea. People are jumping on these qualifying bets, but we have no idea. We've never seen qualifying in Atlanta. Atlanta is not Daytona. It's not Talladega. Handling matters.
They didn't qualify last year?
Both of those races were set on metric. So we've never seen qualifying at Atlanta.
I forgot about that.
We've never, ever seen it at Atlanta. So I cannot understand making Atlanta qualifying bets based off of Daytona or Talladega. First of all, the Fords, definitely showed up in qualifying at Daytona and Dega, but this is smaller. Handling matters more at Atlanta. But one of the things I think is Atlanta's a brand new surface. It's a year old. It has so much grip that I don't actually necessarily think the handling is going to matter as much, because what we see with the Fords, basically this year what we've seen is, they fire up while they have short run speed, but their long run speed is crap. But if you're just making a one-lap run and handling doesn't matter because there's so much grip, I think the Fords might be at the real advantage here, even more so than Daytona. Because remember, everybody for qualifying at Daytona was talking about the Fords. I think this is the Fords weekend, but that is total speculation. I have no idea. That's my guess. That's my best guess. I'm not going to bet on a guess, which means I'm also not going to bet on a guess on the Chevys or the Fords or the Toyotas. I'm not guessing. I'm not going to bet because I'm guessing. I'm going to bet to try to make money. Unless I specifically say I'm doing this for entertainment value, which I absolutely will do. Like you said, you might bet to have something to sweat on it. And there are times I make entertainment bets. We all do. But if I'm trying to make a profit off of qualifying, I don't know how I can. I think there's no information available to make a profit off of qualifying. It's a pure guess. The one strategy I think might potentially be long-term profitable when we have an incredibly unknown situation is betting the longest odds cars on the good teams, like a Ty Gibbs at 60-1, or a Ryan Preece at 50-1, or a Chase Briscoe at 33 or whatever it was to 1. I think those are maybe okay, but I don't know. I have no idea. Honestly, don't know.
And that's what's crazy. This is the 5th race of the season and the second one in a row that we're both here sitting saying we don't know what to expect. This Atlanta is super, super new. And I saw a tweet from Brian Murphy, who works for Stewart Haas Racing, about this, and he mentioned quite a few good points. He said a lot of compelling changes or challenges for teams heading into this week's race. The success of implementing the correct balance of downforce and drag is at a premium with this package. In addition, the high of this weekend is 49 degrees, which is 15 degrees lower than the first Atlanta race last year. And then he says, has the surface aged and to what degree? So there are a lot of variables that we don't know, and we're not really going to know at all because we get qualifying and then they're racing. Like I said, there's no practice this week.
That makes it super interesting, because you know what colder temperatures means? It means more dense air. More dense air means more downforce, but also more drag. So it could be a bigger draft, but cars could handle better. So it's a really interesting balance on all of this. But then you mentioned like the tire, the surface, how much has it aged? There's so much unknown here. I think that's a great quote from Brian Murphy to underscore how much we don't know. And we've only seen 2 Atlanta races, so I just don't know how to handicap this. I think there's ways we can handicap it. It's still a drafting race. So drafting race is a drafting race. We've seen some randomness come into these races where guys like Harrison Burton and Cole Custer are finishing in the top 10 and Corey LaJoie has a shot to win. Sure, we've seen that. But do we know which ones of those it'll be? Not necessarily. I think we can make some educated guesses. But at this point, all of the value has been sucked out. Corey LaJoie is 250-1 to win. Now he's, last year when we all got him at that super crazy value. But I don't necessarily think I would have bet him last year at 75-1. I don't necessarily think I'd bet him this year at 75-1. We just don't know. He's not a perennial front runner at these races. Even at the draft race, he's not a perennial front runner. He doesn't lead all of these a ton.
No, he's a survivor, but at the same time, he's aggressive enough. He's not a Michael McDowell. Michael McDowell will survive and get a good finish. Corey LaJoie will survive and he will race to win.
He'll be aggressive.
At the end.
Yes.
And that's
yes.
that's why I like about him. And that's why he's he's been one of the best super speedway or fantasy NASCAR picks for years, just because of just how he's very good on these tracks. But looking back at the 2 races here at Atlanta last year, William Byron won the first one. So does he go back-to-back and get 3 in a row, or back-to-back-to-back and get 3 in a row here this weekend? Ross Chastain finished second in both these races last year, but first race at Atlanta last year, it was a lot of I feel like I remember this race well because this is when I'm very good at, I cannot explain this, but if people have been following me for any length of time, I'm super excited. I always get super excited when we race at Atlanta. The last, let me pull this up quick. The last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 Atlanta races, I am plus $32,377 at Atlanta. And that is old Atlanta and then new Atlanta. In the last 2 years, and this race specifically, I have won a ticket to the big qualifying event as well. So I know I'm due for a bad race, but I really like Atlanta. But going back to, I remember this race so well, because nothing really changed, I feel like, from about midpoint on. William Byron got the lead and just kind of stayed out there, and there were some exciting moments, but nothing too crazy happened in this race, and I think that's part of the reason Greg Mathern was talking about he wishes it was he's glad it's a shorter race, because this race, for the most part, they were just out there just riding around. There was nothing really going on. There was nothing really moving. I remember because I wasn't watching the race. I was busy that day, but I was watching my lineups on DraftKings. I was constantly refreshing it, and it did not change, I swear, for 2 hours. Like, my winning probably changed by like $20 over that 2 hours. So I can understand then why like a race like that would be boring. Second Atlanta race, Chase Elliott started on the pole, won the race, led 96 laps.
Won all the stages.
Yeah, won both stages.
But that was an exciting race. Race.
Byron also.
I don't know. I thought the first Atlanta race was exciting.
Very well.
I thought the first Atlanta race was exciting, and then it had that crazy finish, and Chris Buescher was top forward, finishing backward. I don't know. I thought it was an exciting race, and you never know what's going to happen in that extra 100 miles. So, I'm still just going to disagree on the less is better on this. I will never, ever agree on that. You never know what's going to happen in an extra 100 miles. Even if it's boring, hey, you still got to watch racing for another hour.
The only possible rebuttal I could have against you is that when they go out there, and we've seen this at Talladega, we've seen it at Daytona, we saw it, I think, at Atlanta last year. When they go out there just to ride around to log laps, that's when I'm on board for the race being shorter, because you know what? You just cut out a portion of them doing that, and then they go race at the end. Because that there are certain portions of this race that they're not actually racing. They're just riding around.
But we don't know that. We don't know that that's going to happen. We can assume that, but especially at Atlanta, we don't see the single file train for 43 cars or 36 cars. At Talladega, Daytona, we've seen it occasionally. Daytona 500 this year, we didn't see it at all. They were literally side by side the whole race. We don't know that's going to happen.
It's
so
the
we
times
can't
that
make
it does.
That's fine. Then, but the times that it doesn't, you wish the race was 100 miles longer. So
I agree with you. I'm just
give me more racing.
Just
Just give me more racing. I'm not going to make a judgment on. I want 100 miles less of Atlanta because one of the 2 races was boring, and the other one was actually really exciting. Because I actually don't think either of them were boring last year. I thought both of them were great, and I just don't. I will never ever disagree with less racing. I think that's antithesis, is that the right word? I'm not an English major, to what I am and who I am. It's not. I love racing. give me more. I don't want racing to stop. If racing could be on every day like basketball is, not just, any racing, but like the top level of racing. I would watch Cup Series every day if I could. I'd watch IndyCar every day if I could. I love it. I absolutely love it. Give me more.
Mm-hmm. I hear you. I was just trying to, I was trying to play devil's advocate and
I get it. I cannot side with less racing. You know what that leads to? It leads to less racing. Do we want less racing? Do we want every race to be shorter now? Do we want fewer races potentially? I don't. The IndyCar schedule is so short now. It's 17 races. It runs from March to September, but even from March to April, it's just one race and there's a month off. I don't get enough IndyCar racing. I miss it for so much of the year. We don't want that to become NASCAR. We don't want NASCAR to trim the schedule from 36 to 32 races. I know the drivers and the teams would love it, and I understand. Fully understand being away from your family, but that's also your job. And I'm not going to sit there like, that's your job. You don't deserve anything. Obviously, they do. They deserve family time. They deserve all that. But from a fan standpoint, it's, think about if you're an absolutely diehard NFL fan or an absolutely diehard college basketball fan. It's going to suck when March Madness ends. That day it ends, you have no more basketball until November, right? We all have that thing we love, and when it's over, God, we want it back so bad. And that's me every race with NASCAR. I can't wait for the next one as soon as the previous one ends. So just give me more racing. Give me 1,000 miles. I don't give a crap. I will watch racing all day. All of us would still follow it the whole time if it was 1,000 miles. I promise you we'd all still be following the whole race. The diehards absolutely would still be doing it.
I mean, I might take a nap in there, but hey.
Sure. But we'd still be following it in some way, shape, or form.
Right. When it comes to Atlanta and being a pseudo speedway, obviously we know the guys that are very good at Daytona and Talladega and typically have the speed there. Do you feel like there's a difference though between the guys that are fast there and I feel like Atlanta, it still kind of favors, from what we saw last year, it still favors the top teams more than Daytona and Talladega are a completely even playing field for the most part outside of Cody Ware. But Atlanta, this new Atlanta, there's still, the top teams are still have the advantage. It's just definitely not as much. There's still nobody's going to run away with this race. Nobody's going to we could see a dominator. We saw it in both races last year, but for the most part, if people want to get to the front, they'll be able to. But do you agree there that, these top teams like Hendrick Motorsports is probably going to be the top team again this week, and they're probably going to be able to run up front, in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't know Hendrick specifically, but and I don't even necessarily know big teams specifically, but I think one thing that's very different from Atlanta compared to Daytona and Talladega, maybe not as much with this year Daytona Talladega where track position seemed more important than the past, but Atlanta, track position matters. Corey LaJoie had the track position in Atlanta too, and he didn't relinquish it. Even if he fell to fourth or fifth at certain points in that last stint, he was still there and he could get it back. Track position means so much more Atlanta because it's tighter. The draft isn't quite as big. It's so much harder to pass. You're not going to get a train of cars to help you go around on that third line. It is a lot more important, which is why we see things like these same few cars up front for a good chunk of time. It's just harder to pass. It's harder to get a run going. It's harder to get a tandem, not necessarily tandem like two-car tandem, just get a train going. So, that is what it is. And I'm sitting here 2.7 seconds left in this Mississippi State pit game, and Mississippi State is down by 1, and they get down the ball wide open 3. He misses it.
He missed it?
He missed it. Wide the fuck open. Wide open. And that cost me my first of my 8 teams right there. But I did hit my player prop, so I hit my player prop in that game. Oh, nice. My God. I think, and you were talking, I was trying to glance over at the TV, and I think it said that it set the NCAA record for most lead changes in a game or something. in the tournament. Yeah, I
That was
don't
a
know
really
exactly what the
low-scoring
graphics
second
said.
half.
Yeah, overall it's a low-scoring game, but yeah, that's why I'm so busy this week in terms of just everything. That's why I'm eating dinner on air. I've been working nonstop the past few days with Action Network stuff. I love it. I wouldn't trade it for anything, but that's literally why I'm eating chicken nuggets while we're recording and stuff, because I haven't had a bunch of time to even make food or anything. But I don't remember what I was talking about, but I think it was something about track position being important in Atlanta, and I think that's what the difference is. I wouldn't necessarily say it's big teams or Hendrick themselves, because, I mean, we saw, especially Atlanta 1. If you remember Atlanta 1 last year, we had all those tire problems. Every time a Chevy would get out front, they'd have a tire problem.
Oh, yeah.
Ross Chastain, Ricky Stenhouse Jr., Tyler Reddick. It just felt like every Chevy that got out front ended up having a tire problem at some point. So,
Larson.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of different drivers that led that race and have led both Atlanta races. If you look at it, the only guys that really led multiple times in multiple races were Eric Jones, Chase Elliott, William Byron, and Ricky Stenhouse Jr. or something like that for a significant enough amount. And I'm recalling these names off the top of my head. They may be wrong, but you get the idea. So I think Ross Chastain as well.
First Atlanta race last year, there were 10 drivers that led 10 or more laps, and there was 20 drivers overall that led at least one lap. And that was
that's not riding around. That's not riding around.
That's true. That's true. Second Atlanta race, we had 7 drivers lead 10 or more. 12 drivers lead at least 2 laps. So a little more concentrated there. In the second race, it was also 65 laps shorter than the first race. So as far as Atlanta, do you have anything else? Because we have questions to get to. Like,
we have questions.
I
We
feel
also
like
get the standings to get to.
I know we need to get to the standings. Yeah, let's do the standings. You read my mind there, because I was thinking of that when you were talking about the basketball game. So yeah, let's get to the standings. Alex Bowman leading the points, only driver with top 10s in every single race. He was the Stacking Dennys breakout pick of the season. It's looking pretty good so far. Average finish of 6.3 through 4 races. Kevin Harvick, Ross Chastain, William Byron, Kyle Larson, the top 5 in points. When we look at playoff points, Byron leading the way with 13 already locked in. Kyle Busch has 5, Stenhouse has 5, and then we got Chastain with 3, Larson with 1, and Keselowski with 1. What's your takeaway here? With we're only 4 races into the year, but still 4 races, and 4 races out of the first 26 where we lock in the championship contenders. That's already, I'm trying to do math in my head, not going very well. It's late over here. It's 15% of the season, regular season is done. So, but yeah, Bowman leading the way. What do we think about that?
Well, here's my take. Especially if, Chase Elliott didn't have a snowboarding accident, we'd probably have 4 Hendrick cars in the top 6. Because right now we have 3 in the top 5. And I assume Chase Elliott would be in the top 6 after his second place finish at California, Fontana Auto Club, whatever you want to call it. He'd probably have a good finish at Vegas just like his teammates did. He probably would have a good finish at Phoenix like his teammates did, especially because he's pretty good at Phoenix. So it's a Hendrick-dominated year so far. And remember when we gave our preseason Final Four picks, I had picked Larson and Elliott, and I was debating between Bowman and Byron. Well, I don't think any of us were planning on Chase Elliott getting injured, so my new Final Four would be the 4 I picked, but instead of Chase Elliott, I think at this point I would pick William Byron, and it was a coin toss for me between Byron and Bowman. Not because I thought Bowman was better than Byron, just because things happen in the playoffs. I was trying to be a little different, but I thought Hendrick was going to be really strong this year, and I think it's going to be hard for Chase Elliott to advance to the championship without a significant amount of playoff points, which we know he's going to lose out on a bunch of, because he's going to miss at least 6 races. I think he's going to miss more. It still remains to be seen.
Agree.
But I think it's going to be hard for him to advance to the championship race. So, if we had known preseason Chase Elliott was going to get injured, I think both of us would have probably decided to pick against him, especially if he missed more than 6 races. So my revised Final Four is the same. It's just the 300 cars that aren't Chase Elliott, and Denny Hamlin. I believe that was my fourth pick, if I remember correctly. So, that's what I'm
your final four was Elliott, Larson, Hamlin, Bowman.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm going to roll with that, but I'm going to replace there. And I mean, Alex Bowman, Blake Harris, we knew coming into the year, we knew this was going to be a solid combination. We're not victory lapping this by any means because it's 4 races into the season out of 36. We are 1/9 of the way through the year, but certainly the combination has produced solid results to this point. I don't think Alex Bowman was a top 10 car at Phoenix, but he was borderline. He was right there between 9th and 12th all day, I would say. So that's a kind of an improvement for him on how his Phoenix races have been going recently, finish aside. And the other knock on Alex Bowman and Blake Harris combination was the short flat tracks are going to be their worst combination. So if this is the worst they have, yeah, I love it. I think this is great. So it's one of those things where, again, my little mini whine about it was the other one that you had to choose from was Alex Bowman. You got to stick with and I'm a statistician, a mathematician, so I stick with statistical measures, distributions. You have to stick with your statistical prior. Our prior on Alex Bowman is he's somewhere between a 6th to 12th place driver, let's say that. So barring a lot of evidence that he shouldn't be anything way better than a 6th place driver or anything way worse than a 12th place driver, you kind of have to place him in that range. Sure, maybe you can make inferences based off he had a concussion. Maybe he should be worse. Maybe he has Blake Harris. Maybe he should be better. We don't know. Those are educated guesses at best. But our statistical prior should have been he's somewhere in that probably 6 to 12 range, given he's a Hendrick Motorsports car. That's the performance he's shown the past few years with that team. So I think my pick for him to get to the Final Four isn't because I think he's a top 4 driver. That's more of a he has the opportunity to do that because that's within his range of outcomes. I don't think, thinking he has a concussion means he's going to be anywhere near terrible, but I just think Blake Harris himself has shown time and time again, if we want to talk about statistical priors, Blake Harris has shown time and time again that he elevates teams and drivers, and that should be our statistical prior on Blake Harris. So I think we have to kind of be pretty, I wouldn't say high on Alex Bowman, but I think we have to update our statistical priors to say, yeah, this guy is better than a 13th or 14th or 12th place driver this year. I think he's probably a top 10 driver this year.
Here's a quick stat I noticed with the standings. It's 4 races. Total number of laps is equal to exactly 1,000. And there are 6 drivers that have completed all 1,000 laps. You know who they are? Do you have them in front of you?
I don't, but I would venture to guess Alex Bowman.
Yep.
I'm going to say Kevin Harvick.
Yep.
I'm going to say Denny Hamlin.
Yep. Wow, you're 3 for 3.
And Daniel Suarez.
Yeah. Yep.
Did I get them? Oh, wait, there's 6, you said? Oh, I thought it was...
Yeah, there's 2 more. You got 4 of them.
Oh, shit. Fuck. Busher.
Nope.
Damn.
I don't know. It's 2 bigger names. I'll give you that hint.
Truex.
Truex?
Chastain, duh. Yeah.
Yep, there we go.
Yeah.
Yep.
I don't know why I didn't think of Chastain.
That's but that just in by itself is a little surprising that we're 4 races in and we've had 6 drivers that completed all laps so far. I don't know the history of that, but I feel like that's not normal.
Yeah, I don't remember. I feel like last year though we felt like everybody was having issues. So I don't know if you mean not normal in the good sense or the bad sense, but remember last year we were like, God, there's nobody that's had a bunch of top 5s or 10s at all.
Yeah, I'm just saying completed all the laps. I can't remember. I just feel like that's when I was looking at the standings, I noticed several drivers with exactly 1,000, and then I did the math of the first three races. And I'm like, oh, that's exactly how many laps are. But yeah, other than that, top 10 in points, I'd say, is not super surprising. Like you said, 3 of the top 5 are Hendrick cars. We got Ross Chastain there in third, Harvick in second, who's having a very good year. But the guys maybe further back that we should not be. It's way too early to be concerned, but Tyler Reddick obviously hasn't gotten off to a great start. He's 20th in points. Corey LaJoie, shout out Corey LaJoie. He's 18th in points through 4 races. And then of course, what's funny? Travis Pastrana is still ahead of BJ McLeod and Ty Dillon in points.
God. Ty Dillon, man. He's dead last in points of the drivers that have run every race.
And what's crazy is he was in my top lineup of the weekend at Phoenix, even though his car is so garbage.
And this was a weird one because you were talking about this on your live show thing or whatever. It was so tough because that bottom tier was miserable this week for DFS. And I know you were high on Harrison Burton, but he was pretty rough. But none of the guys in that bottom tier were really any good. So it was just an absolute crapshoot, and it was not a fun week to be picking from that bottom tier of drivers. And I guess even Zane Smith, he started 34th, only finished 31st. A lot of people were on him. I know you were talking about fading him, which I think worked out. So it was a week where you end up having to go 3 dominators and 3 6K guys, which is what ended up being the optimal lineup, and even some of the closer to optimal ones. So turns out this is a week where punting was not the option. But DFS this week for that bottom tier was just an absolute mess. And I do have to say, Paul Menard pick of the week, Ty Gibbs. Well, you can't win them all.
Ty Gibbs strikes again. Love that.
Yeah,
guy. My favorite driver.
Oh God.
But getting to some of our questions here. This is a good one. Who should replace Kevin Harvick in the 4 car? Is it plausible to get LaJoie in there, or is he locked down by Chevy? Please don't say Riley Herbst or Cole Custer.
I'll say Riley Herbst or Cole Custer. I don't know. I legitimately have no idea. Those two would make the most sense, right? But I have no idea. I feel like you have that. Is it J-Ski or something that has all the contract free agent stuff? Because I don't know where that is. I never look at that. But I don't even know if Eric Jones is locked up for multiple years at Legacy. But I feel like he's a guy that deserves a step up again, whether it's within Chevy or going to another manufacturer. If I had to say somebody other than Riley Herbst or Cole Custer, I would love to see Eric Jones get another opportunity at a bigger team.
Yeah, J-Ski's not even starting to talk about anything like that. It's too early in the season. But here's what I'm going to say about Stewart-Haas Racing: they never do anything to make a splash. They could have got Kyle Larson, and they didn't. So if you don't want it to be Riley Herbst or Cole Custer, it's probably going to be Riley Herbst and Cole Custer. It's just look at the stable that Stewart-Haas has had over the years. They just don't do anything aggressive, and they've kind of just anchored to Harvick over the years, and it's worked out for them. But you know what? They need to get a big guy, and I'm not sure there's going to be a big guy available, especially one that they're willing to take a chance on.
It's not going to be Zane Smith. As much as Zane Smith is in that Ford stable, right now it's with front row, and then I would assume probably Roush, Fenway, Keselowski when Keselowski retires. That would be my best guess on where Zane Smith goes. So I don't think he's going to be loaned to Stewart-Haas Racing because there's a pretty big connection. I wouldn't say pretty big, but I think there's a decent connection there between front row and RFK Roush that I don't really see it. Buescher himself was at front row and then was loaned to was it JTG, before coming back into the Ford stable with RFK, which was then Roush Fenway Racing. So I don't see it being somebody like a Zane Smith either. I think it's going to come from in-house, or maybe somebody like an Eric Jones. I don't know, because I don't think Eric Jones necessarily has his loyalty to any one manufacturer, especially given he was with Toyota and they got cut from there. So I don't know. I have no clue. I don't know, and I think we'll all find out around the same time you find out.
What about just throwing this one out there, what about someone like a Harrison Burton?
Why?
I don't know.
What has he done to deserve a Stewart Haas ride? He's been miserable in that. He's been miserable. I'm just looking at
current Ford drivers. Yeah. Well, Eric Almirola's retiring at the end of the year too, right? So they have 2 spots.
At the end of the following year, Eric Almirola signed a 2-year extension. So he's here this year and next.
They'll probably.
I think it was just because they wanted to stagger both him and Harvick retiring. I don't think they wanted them both retiring the same year, honestly.
Yeah, that'd be tough, especially if there's no free agents available. But they'll probably
which is even more reason why I think it's a Custer or Herbst fill-in, because it gives them a year to develop somebody else in the Xfinity series at Stewart Haas there, and then potentially fill that other role. So that Eric Almirola is leaving. So yeah, the question is, don't say Herbst or Custer, but that's probably where it's going.
Yeah. Another tweet I saw, this wasn't a question that came in, but I saw a tweet, and I thought this was interesting, especially after, some of the names that you've dropped here recently. 7 drivers completed all 4 races this year. None of them have cracked the top 15. I'll give you 3 of them because it's pretty obvious, the 3. Todd Gilliland, Ty Dillon, BJ McLeod. Who are the other 4?
Gregson?
Yep.
None of them have cracked. Wait, haven't finished in the top 15 is what you're saying, right?
Correct, yeah. You know the other one. You just said Gregson.
So I know the other one? Fuck.
We just talked about this last week.
I don't know.
Ty Gibbs. 2 young guys.
Oh. Hasn't finished in the top 15?
Yeah. There's one on here that's really going to surprise you. The other one, so there's 2 left. The other one is running into problems left and right.
God, dude, I have no idea. Let me think on this. Eric Almirola,
yep.
Yeah.
Now the last
I was
one
just
is
thinking about who had a problem. I was just thinking about who had a problem this past race. The last one's going to surprise me. I was going to say Priest, but he finished well in that race just now. I have no idea who's it.
Eric Jones.
Really?
Has not finished better than 19th. He finished 19th at Auto Club and 19th at Vegas. 21st at Phoenix.
Wow. It makes sense. He typically runs better than that too. It's been a struggle for Legacy so far. Jimmy Johnson also finished 31st in his lone race. So 9 races combined between their 3 drivers. They have 0 top 18 finishes.
And, that brings us to another point. Jimmy Johnson competing in the Cup race at COTA. Also announced he's going to be competing at the Coca-Cola 600. So we should see we will see Johnson again in a couple weeks. But that brings up I've always had this kind of concern. Does adding that 3rd car hurt Eric Jones and Gregson in a way? Does it spread them too thin? We debated this earlier in the year.
Maybe for those races, but I mean, what about the races where Jimmy Johnson is in the 3rd car? I think there's no way they're not using those resources to help those 2. I don't think it's spreading them too thin outside of Daytona or COTA or the 600, but at the same time, you've already established those non-Johnson programs at that point. By the time we get to the Coca-Cola 600, Johnson will only be in his third race this year. That'll be his third race. So he'll only have been in 2 of the, 13 or 14 races. So you have plenty of time to use those Johnson resources on your other 2 teams there. That I don't think it's an issue. I think it would be a bigger issue if it was a full-time entry rather than 3 races out of 15 or so, or whatever it is. So, no, I don't think it's an issue. I don't think it's spreading anything too thin.
Okay. Another question we got, and I like this question. How do you distinguish good chalk versus bad chalk? Last week, good chalk was Kyle Larson, bad chalk was Eric Almirola.
That doesn't, actually, I disagree with that. I don't think that was good chalk or bad chalk. I think Eric Almirola was unlucky chalk. I think there was good chalk and bad chalk there. I think that's results oriented. That's very. I think Eric Almirola was good chalk because he moved through the field and was going to probably keep moving through the field until his wheel broke. If his wheel hadn't broke, he would have been good chalk, right? So I think that's results-oriented thinking, and I think Kyle Larson had the chance to be bad chalk had William Byron won the race off pit road, after stage 1. So I think that's results-oriented thinking. Instead, I would prefer just to, compare to ownership percentages and things like that. What was Kyle Larson's ownership percentage versus what was his probability of ending up in the winning lineup? And honestly, I think both of them were pretty close to fair. So, don't be results oriented would be my answer to that.
So here's how this is why I like this question, not specifically this example, but this debate of chalk depending on who the drivers are, because here's my take when it comes to chalk with DFS. If there is a high-priced driver, let's say, 9,000 or above, and he's starting 30-something in, like, a Las Vegas race, but he does not have the potential to also dominate that race and get fastest laps and laps led, I am much more likely to go underweight on that guy because the same drivers in that price range are equally as good as opposed to drivers that can make up place differential lower in the salary range on DraftKings. So
but you're getting to the crux of the issue here, which is just probability of ending up in the optimal lineup. That's literally the answer, is just what is the probability they end up in the optimal lineup versus what is their likely ownership. That's going to be my answer to everything. Always and forever when it comes to DFS. If a guy is going to be 80% owned, but he should be in the optimal lineup only 50% of the time, then he's bad chalk. But if a guy should be in the optimal lineup 50% of the time and he's only going to be 20% owned, then it's good chalk, right? So the answer for me will always be, what is your projected percentage of him being in the optimal lineup versus your projected ownership percentage of the driver?
But a lot of people don't calculate that percentage and don't know how.
That's fair. I understand that point. I'm just saying from a mathematical perspective, that's the answer.
That's the answer, but just like a general DFS player, casual DFS player here, that is my general rule of thumb. What I was talking about is the full upside.
I think the other part of it is use the information available to you. So, if you're a casual DFS player, subscribe to all the free stuff you can. Not subscribe, but follow all the free stuff if you can. Because those people will point you as much in the right direction. If there's paid places, pay for those, whether it's an optimizer or premium stats or anything like that. Because that'll help you go in the right direction. I don't think there is necessarily a blanket answer every week. It depends on the track. Sometimes I'll pay for a chalk high-priced driver starting in the back if he's clearly the fastest car and it's a track with a low DNF rate where you can pass. Why? Auto Club I think is actually a really good track for those guys to be high-priced chalk simply because they can move through the field. Maybe there's not enough laps led, but it's something similar. Maybe like the Southern 500 or a Homestead where there's more laps available to have fastest laps and laps led. It's not necessarily bad chalk. So it's very situational dependent, and I don't think there's necessarily a blanket answer.
Yeah, it's definitely week by week. Like, you don't.
And what if there's 8 high-priced guys in the back? Then it's worse than if there's 1 high-priced guy in the back, or better. It depends on the lap-led deal again. You know, it just really depends. I don't think there's a blanket answer. You kind of just have to project where you think each driver's chances of ending up in the optimal lineup are versus his ownership. So it's never a perfect science. There's always moving parts and pieces, and no 2 races are the same. But use all the information you have available to you is what I would say. Generally speaking, I think we can get a good sentiment, right? Like, everybody thought Kyle Larson was going to be good this past weekend. So I thought he was going to be, over-owned. And whether he was or wasn't, he still had a great race. I think he was probably what was his ownership, actually? What did it end up at?
I'll pull it up here quick.
I have it, too. I just don't have it in front of me.
It was 52.65%.
And I had him optimally in the 40%. And I think my number was fair, because what if William Byron came out of that pit stop at the end of stage 1 first? There's a very, very real chance Kyle Larson doesn't end up in the winning lineup then, because of how much track position mattered. So I think it was pretty fair. And it just, it comes down to sentiment. I think we all can gauge sentiment from what we see on Twitter. You were doing your live show and everybody was asking about these certain drivers, and then somebody asked about this driver, like, oh wow, I didn't think of that. And those are the ones that kind of I'll latch on to, like, wow, we really should have thought of that and nobody did, and then you pointed out. That's really cool. And that's the best thing about doing your live show or any other live show, is even though you and I are really good at what we do, somebody will just say this thing and it'll plant the seed in your head. And you're like, wow, that's a really good point, because none of us are perfect. We can't think or know of everything. So that's why it's great to have group discussion. Talk to other experts. Talk to people who aren't experts, because they'll be thinking in ways you aren't thinking. If you are an expert, me and you, we should definitely embrace wisdom of the crowds, because that's the reason it's called wisdom of the crowds, and the reason it's so effective is because sometimes we use wisdom of the experts and it's not always right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that was the reason, I ended up with so many lineups last week with Ty Dillon in them, which ended up, being able to afford the top guys and scoring well. So yeah, there's definitely, there was, even going into that live, I was like, there's no way I'm taking Ty Dillon. Well, then someone pointed it out and I started doing the math, and I'm like, actually, it kind of makes sense, because he's so cheap that you can then afford the really good guys. But yeah, going back to last week, a big thing that you talked about on the podcast last week was tire fall off in practice, which then, I tweeted out a chart of tire fall off. And actually it was like it went pretty far as reach and everything. But we got a question on that tire fall off. And I feel like a lot of people didn't quite understand what we meant by tire fall off, because they took it as Tyler Reddick had the best long run car, and that's not exactly what that chart was saying. And that chart wasn't exactly saying that Harvick had the best run car either. It's that they didn't fall off as much compared to guys like Kyle Larson and William Byron. But that does not mean that they're faster than them. It means that they just didn't fall off as much. But you have to look at this as a whole, and if a car like Kyle Larson and William Byron, who were super, super fast on the short run, they gained so much speed over that even though they fall off more on the long run, they're still faster overall. Because I probably had like 5 people message me and they're like, well, that means Tyler Reddick's faster. No,
so I tweeted out a chart of just Reddick versus Larson, and I think I just dropped it in our chat here.
Yeah.
And you will, in that chart, or that graph, is exactly what you're talking about. Larson had more fall off, but he was faster than Reddick over every single metric, even with the longer fall-off. And then by the end of that run, their fall-off was identical. They were parallel lines. And if that means if they're parallel lines, Reddick's not gaining on Larson. They're literally parallel at that point. So just because Larson had more fall-off, to your point, doesn't mean he was going to end up worse than Tyler Reddick. And that's why I tweeted out just between those two, because they both went out early in the practice session and made long runs. They were a very fair comparison. That's why I didn't tweet William Byron, because he made his run later in the practice session. just between Larson and Reddick, that is what I tweeted out. And it kind of played out. Larson did, in the race, have more fall off, but he was still faster than Reddick throughout the whole race, even over the long run. So, that is what just a simple graph that I made there, which didn't get as much traction as yours. And I'm not complaining about it. I'm just saying it didn't draw as much eyeballs as your Excel thing there, to make sure people weren't stealing things and, not plagiarizing. Yeah, not plagiarizing and stuff. But it's interesting because, my graph here very clearly shows Reddick was never at any point going to be faster than Larson over this long run had that practice speed translated to the race.
Yeah, and like I said, I still feel like, practice overall was very close to what we saw in the race. But the question that we got today regarding this tire fall off was, looking back, do you think this was noise or static? Harvick seemed like he had the best tire fall off in the race, and Toyota's largely underwhelmed. I completely disagree that Toyota's largely underwhelmed, because you looked at green flag speed. Christopher Bell, you agree or you disagree?
I agree with you.
With me? You agree with me? Yeah.
Yeah.
Christopher Bell was fourth in green flag speed. Reddick was fifth. Hamlin was sixth. Toyota's were the cars that we thought they were. They just weren't as good as Larson and Byron and then Harvick. Larson, Byron, Harvick were the top three cars last
And there's a reason I identified Harvick and bet him outright, because I thought he had a really good long-run car in practice. I don't think anything went against what we saw in practice, especially Harvick. Eric Almirola had a really good long-run car. He just qualified in the back. But over the long run, the first 25 or so laps of a green flag run, Eric Almirola wasn't really moving through the field, but the last half of those green flag runs, Eric Almirola would come through the field up until his wheel broke. But it lined up, everything lined up with what we saw in practice. I legitimately think pretty much Penske's fell off, especially Logano. Practice has been so incredibly, I wouldn't say predictive, but, reminiscent, kind of telling of what we see in the race. Obviously, things can happen over a long race where certain drivers will maybe have a bad restart or a penalty or this, that, or the other. But by and large, it's matched up to what we've seen in the race. I thought practice was another good indicator here. So it was really hard to pass at Phoenix, so it wasn't the only indicator. It was hard and it wasn't hard to pass. It was hard to pass further forward you got, but less hard to pass, maybe further back. And it also depends on the long run. Like, if we got really long run, it became easier to pass. And so it's just one of those things. And somebody else pointed out, restarts mattered a lot. And it was Evan Chaney on Twitter pointed out restarts mattered a lot. And I definitely agree with that, but it certainly was, I wouldn't even necessarily say the main indicator, but I do think it was a pretty significant indicator and something to note for future short flat races and or the championship race, depending on how things change throughout the year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But that's the same thing. Like, how are you going to predict who's going to do well in these restarts? One race, driver X will do great on restarts, and the next race they'll do terrible on restarts. Restart, what they call retention rate or this, that, and the other, those restart statistics are very noisy race to race, and even throughout the whole year, it usually takes a multiple year sample size for restart statistics to be, air quotes, sticky or whatever we call that, where they become predictive for the same driver, right? Like those drivers I've seen have great restart statistics one year and then have terrible restart statistics the next year. You need to take typically a multi-year average to determine whether drivers are good at restarts.
And there's so many variables that go on with restart, like, are they in traffic? Did someone in front of them check up? Like, there's just so much that you can't possibly sit there and try to, unless you really, really analyzed, the actual restarts every single time. No. Mm-hmm. Unless you, like, Pro Football focused it and watched every single time, made notes every single time. Like, it's not going to happen.
Well, that's kind of what I do with my flags metric. I Pro Football focus the not necessarily, I don't watch the race back, but I look at when was the cautions. I remove the lap before and after the caution, because those are typically drivers will be slowing down when the caution flies, and the caution will count on the next lap, or the restart will be not indicative. And then, you have to make a determination at what point was this car no longer healthy because it took significant enough damage to make it slower. Those are judgment calls I make, but the flags metric has been incredibly predictive of speed, more so than green flag speed itself. More so than average running position. So my flags metric, which is a lap by lap metric, it's literally how well are you compared to the field on every single lap that your car is healthy, and only compared to other healthy cars, and only on the same strategy as you. So we're not comparing somebody on a 2-stop strategy at Richmond to somebody on a 1-stop strategy at Richmond. We're adjusting that for the field level. It's called field level adjusted green speed because it's adjusted to the level of the field that you are competing against, which whether that means healthy cars or same strategy, that kind of thing. And I'm finding it to be. We've always wanted something. PJ Walsh and I at Action Network talked about this last year. We want something that is more independent from driver rating, because driver rating is tied to finishing position, which is not very predictive. And the problem with green flag speed is it can be very misleading if your car crashes out early. Then you either can be really fast or really slow, depending on when in the race that car crashes out or how it affects the car, if you decide to run a few laps later in the race. But even just truncating things and saying, this driver crashed out in the third quarter of the race, so I'm only going to use the first 2 quarters, isn't quite predictive because it's not telling you how they do compared to the rest of the field who also had healthy cars at the same time. And it's not on a lap-by-lap basis. So I truly believe the metric I'm using is one of the most predictive metrics we can get, because it doesn't matter if a car had a DNF now or not. It doesn't matter if, the guy had a problem, because I'm only counting the healthy laps against other cars' healthy laps. And if there are fewer healthy cars, I'm weighting those laps less, because let's say the 10 best cars in the race, the absolute clear best 10 cars, all had problems halfway through the race. Then all of a sudden, this other guy is the fastest car for the second half of the race, but was really only the 11th best car. Why would I weight those laps equally to the other first half of the race where all those other cars were healthy and better? You shouldn't, right? So I'm also weighting the laps by the importance of the lap based off the number of the cars in the field and the strategy that they're on.
Yeah. Would you post the flags metric anywhere?
I've been tweeting them, but right now I don't have a data table or anything, because Action Network, we don't really yet have up a landing page set up for flags, but the goal would be to eventually have that set up somewhere. But I tweet them out every week for the most part. If not the whole field, at least the top 10, 15, 20, top half of the field. The part we tend to care about more than the others, Yeah. So I do know, at least for Auto Club and Vegas, I tweeted out a good chunk of the field, if not all of it. And I tweeted out some, from Auto Club to Vegas, I tweeted out, well, how did, Auto Club driver rating, Auto Club fastest laps, Auto Club's laps led, Auto Club finish, Auto Club average running position, Auto Club green flag speed, how they all compare to predicting Vegas. And I did the same for flags, and it turns out flags was the number one predictor of Vegas among all those other metrics. So, that shows the importance of it is adjusting the appropriate strength. And I also track position adjust them. So I have track position adjusted flags, which, if a car is stuck in traffic, they're not going to be as fast as they probably would be in clean air. So I adjust for the track position as well.
Gotcha. Couple other questions we got here. Going back to Atlanta, how much do last year's results factor into this year with something like green flag speed or some other metric, or no, because it's a random pseudo speedway now?
I have no fucking clue. We've had 2 races there. I'm just going to be honest with you, I have no fucking idea. I can't make predictions on race number 3 from a 2-race sample ever of this track. Especially a drafting track, right? Like green flag speed doesn't matter at a drafting track. I don't know if average running position makes more of a difference or not, because you can Corey LaJoy it and get your average running position by taking a strategy. But if you don't take that strategy, all of a sudden your average running position's worse and you wouldn't be in that position to win. So I don't necessarily think there's a way to indicate how likely you are to win, because I think LaJoy's team kind of outsmarted everyone last year. But I think teams will learn from that, and LaJoy will be much less likely to win this year because of that. You know what I'm saying? So we don't want to be over results oriented, which is where I think people are going. They're becoming too results oriented, not in his finishing position, but his result in that he ran up near the front. That means he has a good shot to win. I disagree. He his team out-strategied them, and he was able to hold on that track position, because I think track position matters at Atlanta. So how do we know what's going to happen? We don't. I think every crew chief will see what happened last year, especially with LaJoy, realize how much that track position mattered and how much he was able to hold on to it, even in an air quote lesser car, and they'll adjust their strategy accordingly. So I don't think LaJoy has the same upside he had last year, because I think teams are going to adjust for that.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that 100%. But at the same time, do we know anything? No. Did we know anything in the Atlanta races last year? Not really. It's what it is. Let me see here. One of the questions: why did RotoDoc block me on Twitter?
I don't know. You probably were annoying. You can send me the and I'll take a look. I have no idea.
I think we've talked about this one before.
We probably have.
What percentage of your bankroll should your unit size be? Standard's 1%, I believe.
I don't know. I don't necessarily think that's a standard, because I think that's if you're betting on a single game, not on a race where you're going to have 10 bets. If you're betting on a single game, I think that's fine. But if you're making 15 bets in a race and they're typically correlated, you don't want to have 15% of your bankroll on a single race.
Oh, no.
Right?
Yeah.
And there's times I will bet 15, 20, 25 units on a race, depending on, the situation, the race, the likelihood my bet is to win compared to the odds. So it just all depends. I don't want to be betting literally a quarter of my bankroll on a race. So my unit size, I think for any race, maybe your units should total 1 or 2% of your bankroll. So adjust your unit size. NASCAR different from your unit size for NFL or college basketball or whatever, because those are very independent events, whereas a race is one single event and they're all intertwined.
Yeah.
So you should be betting 1 or 2% of your bankroll total on an individual race, I think, is what I would recommend. But even then, your unit size is kind of average thing. I like to bet a unit here, a unit there, because it makes the math easier. But honestly, you should be betting different amounts depending on the size of the edge that you have, which is why you and I will hammer something that we know is like a ridiculously outpriced line. Even if it's super long odds, if it's something like 11-1 and it should be 5-1 or 3-1, that's a big discrepancy. So I don't mind dropping a good chunk on it, even though I know it's going to lose 50, 60, 80% of the time, depending on what the odds should be. I will still drop a good amount on it because that is what is optimal for bankroll growth. But that doesn't mean you should be dropping a large percentage of your bankroll. It means you should be dropping a large percentage of your bankroll for that race on it, not your overall bankroll. So that's my answer.
Yeah, you're right. Like when I always go back to the Ryan Blaney top 10 that FanDuel had at like minus 150 or something. Like I dumped a shit ton of money on it. Like I would not recommend anyone do it. Like if I was going by unit size, I dropped 15 units on it or whatever. Don't do that. But I saw an edge and I was going to exploit it. And then I got my ass handed to me. So
Exactly. There's no guarantees in any of this. And this is what I would compare it to. How much do you play a weekend on DFS? That's how much I would spend on a race. Right? So if you spend 1% of your bankroll on a DFS slate, spend 1% of your bankroll on a race. Or if you spend 5% of your DFS bankroll on a race, spend 5% of your betting bankroll on a race. And if you have 10 bets, then that means your unit should average about 0.5% of your bankroll. Or, it's totally different for who you are, your risk tolerance. I cannot recommend an arbitrary number, but allocate a certain percent of your bankroll for a whole race and then determine your unit size off of that for NASCAR, because it's different from NFL where each thing is independent. One race is one race. Or even in NFL, one slate is one slate, and you're betting on the whole slate in DFS for NFL, which is why we limit ourselves there. But independent events is different than totally dependent events.
Yeah, and like you said, it goes a lot is depending on what kind of edge you have. Like DFS wise, I don't play the same amount every week. I might play 20 times as much next week as I did this week because I feel like I have an edge. So it all depends on all that. So yeah, I'm with you. There's definitely not an easy answer here, especially with NASCAR, just because this sport is so different than typical betting. I think that question is a lot easier to answer if we're talking football or basketball or something like that.
Absolutely.
But let's get to our picks this week. I know you've already made your random fantasy racing pick of the week and Doc blocked. Who is that?
I think it's a pretty big one here, if I remember correctly. I'm just searching. Yeah, that's what I remembered. My random fantasy racing pick for Atlanta is Ryan Blaney. He is Doc blocked. And if you look at my results this year, they have not been good. Once again, they have not been good. I didn't even qualify for the Daytona 500.
Here's the thing. You're not picking shithole drivers either.
That's what I'm saying. My number 14 driver, which is, of course, Chase Briscoe, finished 20th. And honestly, had a 30th place car. Got lucky to finish 20th. When you're saying Chase Briscoe was lucky to finish 20th and had a 30th place car, you know you're Doc blocked when Chase Briscoe has a 30th place car. At Las Vegas, Michael McDowell finished 25th, and we know how good he was last year. He wasn't a world beater or anything, but he had his career year last year. Now he's finishing 25th. And this past weekend at Phoenix, Austin Dillon lucked into it, just like Chase Briscoe. Austin Dillon lucked into a 16th place finish, but he was legitimately probably a 30th place car. So even though I'm getting guys that aren't typically 30th place cars, I'm getting on the weeks that they are 30th place cars, and I've been a little lucky to have them finish as well as they have, I guess aside from Michael McDowell. But this week I have Ryan Blaney, so he's probably going to be a 20th place car this week just because that's how things have been going, and he'll probably finish 10th.
Yeah, at Phoenix, you mentioned Austin Dillon and how lucky he got. Green flag speed, he was 26th fastest. So,
God,
that tells you anything. He was so bad in that race, and yeah, he just got lucky like he always does. But, yeah, so Blaney's Doc blocked. I pulled Noah Gragson. So now my last 3 weeks have been Todd Gilliland, BJ McLeod, and Noah Gragson. So can I just get one good pick, please?
Yeah. You've been struggling with the actual picks, and I've been struggling with the speed of the decent picks I've had.
Yeah, absolutely. We're both equally pretty bad, but one place that I'm definitely not struggling in is our pick to win. I have 3 straight top 5s right now.
Man, you're crushing it.
I know, and you got on the board last week with the top 5 with Blaney in second. Who's your pick to win Atlanta this weekend?
Ryan Blaney. I'm going with the Doc blocked driver.
Oh boy.
Can you imagine if the Doc block driver wins the race, wins the Stacking Dennys pick, wins the Steve Lufender random fantasy? It would be the greatest moment of my totally random career. I mean, because this is
That's
let's
awesome.
be real, this is kind of a random race and pick. Like, we've talked about this the whole show. We have no fucking idea who's going to do well at Atlanta or who's going to dominate or if dominating even matters. Like, it kind of did matter those first two races, but at the same time, they're also kind of lucky in some ways. I don't know. I have no idea. I'm just going to pick Ryan Blaney because I think it's pretty funny that, I'm picking. This might be the first time I've ever picked my doc blocked driver.
From my memory, I think it is, but don't hold me to that. I could be wrong.
Yeah, I'm doing the clicking thing on my mouse again where I'm keep highlighting the driver that I'm picking. And it's just a bad habit I have. I click on my mouse because I'm a little, not OCD isn't the right word, but I just have bad habits, I guess.
Ticks?
ADD isn't the right
Is it a
word.
tick?
It's not a tick. I don't know. I need something to do. I always need something to do. Like I get bored easily, so I need something to distract myself. Even when I'm talking, even when I'm listening to you, I'm still listening, I'm still paying attention, but I have to be doing something. So if you hear me clicking on my mouse, it's going to happen every show.
Man, I have a couple of guys in mind here. I'm gonna go Alex Bowman. I think Alex Bowman gets it done, gets his first win of the year.
Here's something I have to say about Alex Bowman. I've had multiple people tweet this week because I made that tweet like Alex Bowman and Blake Harris and then McGrath up. 2 or 3 people replied like, I can't wait to get him at a road course. His odds at a road course. Because remember Coda last year and a couple other races? He had some pretty strong races. I'm interested in how well Michael McDowell did at road courses last year. I mean, Michael McDowell's always been a good road course racer, but certainly last year was the best year he's ever had at road courses. I'm intrigued. I'm intrigued for sure. But, I think Alex Bowman's an interesting one because he typically hasn't been great at drafting tracks. So it's definitely a contrarian pick from you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's another gut thing. Just like last week I said, you remember I said Kevin Harvick, Stuart Haas, they're going to come back to their dominant ways, and you know what? I was right. So we'll see if I'm going to be right again here this weekend at Atlanta, and if Alex Bowman's finally going to get on track here and keep his great season going because he's obviously having a very good year. But I don't have anything else for Atlanta. What about you?
No, I don't have anything left for this one. I got a lot to do for NCAA basketball. I've got, it's 9:30 here Pacific time. I have a show at 8 a.m. Pacific time, and the game's just, wrapped up while we were on this podcast, so I've got a lot of preparing to do for 8 a.m. tomorrow, so it's a good time to wrap it up for me.
Yeah. So next week we got Circuit of the Americas, so we get our first road course race of the year next week, Circuit of the Americas, and then we'll be going to Richmond. So, we'll talk to you guys next week. Good luck with all your betting, DFS. And hopefully we get another good Atlanta race, another strong finish with the pseudo speedway. But that's all we got for this episode. Thanks for listening in, and see you guys later.